Good morning and welcome to another edition of the FTTC podcast, sponsored by Thailand's finest, Bang Poo Industrial Waste Management Center. Bang Poo, need we say any more? We are your home for breaking news and breaking balls in the fantasy sports world. From touchdowns to tailgates, we've got it all covered with a dash of witty banter. I'm your host, Jason Stankiewicz, and today I will be joined a bit later by the man in the moment, the G League star, Mr. Steve Blazer. On today's podcast, we'll whip around the league to discuss all the FTTC results of Week 2, including another top-tier performance from Take a Stand. Then we'll hear from the man himself as he discusses his G League tryout. We'll also talk about some of the recent trades shaking up the FTTC landscape, and finally, we'll take some questions from our listeners. Without further ado, let's whip around the league. All right, moving into our Week 2 matchups, we're going to go ahead and start off with a matchup that is very close to this podcaster. That is Stinky's matchup. So Stinky and Jordy's Ghost, a tight matchup, 88-91. Jordy's Ghost comes out on top. A couple misplays from Stinky. Gabe Davis sitting on the bench, swapping out Baltimore defense for Giants defense really could have made the difference. Honestly, a poor week of management from Stinky. Many in the league have come to expect better, but also, a lot listening to this podcast know that it can go quite a lot worse. Stinky now sitting at 1-1. Jordy's Ghost, 2-0, sitting second. And honestly, there's three viable quarterbacks on this roster right now. You got three quarterbacks putting up some points. Perhaps Jordy's Ghost is going to look to entertain some trades. Could definitely see them looking to move one of those quarterbacks on, maybe even two of those quarterbacks on in an effort to improve some of the depth around their running backs and wide receivers. Moving on, we had nice catch Blanco Nino knock off Roadrunners Naz 110-102. Another devastating injury for Mr. Brian Durante over at Roadrunners parentheses Naz. Nick Chubb obviously suffering a gruesome leg break. We certainly don't expect him back this year. Another note from this podcaster, a very shrewd move to pick up Jerome Ford about a minute before kickoff. Team Stinky definitely going to benefit from this injury. But moving back to Roadrunners Naz, we did ask for an official statement from Roadrunners Naz, and the owner, Mr. Brian Durante, had this to say. He doesn't quite feel like he can come back from the scales being tipped so far against him. He thinks it could be quite a down year for Roadrunners parentheses Naz. And they did issue an official statement a little bit later in the day that was, quote, "Damn, man, Nick Chubb, praying for the best." Obviously a class act over there at Roadrunners Naz. The guy has really shown in the past few years that he's above any kind of bashing of players or opponents. Truly a proud owner and honestly, a proud member of the FTTC. But looking at the matchup a little bit closer, the Roadrunners Naz bench put up quite a few points. I think they came out with almost an 80-point performance here. Let me just double check this one. But perhaps there's a little bit more depth there than we thought initially. And if that's the case, maybe Roadrunners Naz isn't quite down as bad as thought. And in fact, we'll touch on that a little bit later. I think Mr. Durante is out there making some shrewd moves. So we'll touch on the trade he made. But yeah, 78 points from his bench. You got Russell Wilson put up some points, so a second quarterback. But he did lose Anthony Richardson to injury, as well with a concussion. You got Sky Moore, George Pickens on the bench putting up some big points. So maybe there is a little bit of talent still on this roster that he's able to stretch out and really get the best of. On the other side, nice catch, Blanco Nino. A decent performance, putting up 110 points. Overall, team performed about as expected. Tampa Bay defense smashed Chicago. Puka Nacua, though, a hot pickup of last week, sitting on the bench with 22 points. Nice catch, Blanco Nino. May want to get that man in the starting lineup sometime soon. Moving on here, we had Strickland Propane, following another close one to Take a Stand. Take a Stand, our league leaders at the moment. But Strickland Propane sitting at 0-2, despite putting up a large number of points thus far. Perhaps they're the best 0-2 team. Really not the start they wanted, but I could definitely see them bouncing back. Take a Stand, an absolute buzzsaw at the moment. 84 points on the bench. No matter who Mr. Blazer throws out there, it seems like they're going to put up points. And that, seems like it could be some karma for what the league has done, the way the league has treated him with relation to his G League punishment. A little bit more on that a little bit later, but obviously, Mr. Blazer is relishing in the top of the standings at the moment. Next whip around here, we have Mike's Lucky Charm falling to Sneaky Pete. Sneaky Pete, truly sneaky this week. Lucking out with 26 points from Pittsburgh on Monday night. Roster's definitely very shaky. Another, bad beat tight loss for Mike's Lucky Charm. You got to think that there's a little bit more talent on the scene than the record represents. And surely they'll get back to some winning ways pretty soon. But Sneaky Pete, the roster lacking a little bit of depth. I think still a little stinky though, still a little stinky. Our low man of the week in the next matchup, Auto Draft Bot Squad. Ooh, 62 points. You hate to see it. He was missing his top two running backs, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, both out. There's a couple decent backups on that roster, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders. You'd expect maybe a little bit more from those guys, but if those two, top two running backs aren't playing, their roster is lacking skill. And I'm not sure this is a roster that will get very far this year. So playoffs might be a surprise. Vic Vinegar on the other side of that matchup, 118 points, huge contributions from new joiners. Really another year of shrewd management. Vic Vinegar, always one of the perennial playoff members of this league, and honestly seems to be taking advantage of some other owners. In our final match of the week, we had the D's Acers knock off Daddy Spooks, 89-81. Team DS, wrong Jags wide receiver, started Zay Jones, 0 points. Tough performance last week. Christian Kirk on the bench, he was the guy to start last week, and I think a little questionable starting Jones over Kirk. But clearly Team DS has some talent. We'll see if he continues to make any more bonehead decisions like this. But I do want to go back to the last matchup for 1 second, and I do need to crown Auto Draft Bot Squad as the Village Idiot of the Week with 62 points. He did have a nice shotgun, though, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Finally, the D's Acers, Bengal stack yet to click. When they do, you got to imagine this team will really start putting up points. Rashad White clicked. Najee Harris, though, honestly pretty bad. I do not think he's a good running back. Could be looking to move on from him pretty soon, supposedly, in the D's Acers landing. Maybe looking for another running back. Who knows? I could see that team try and swing a deal for another RB to add to the squad. Anyway, let's move on to some trade grades. We had a couple big moves in the FTTC in the past week. The first one that we had was Tua Tagovailoa and Tyler Algier going to Sneaky Pete from Vic Vinegar, with Vic Vinegar receiving T. Higgins and DJ Moore in the other direction. Personally, I thought this trade was absolutely laughable. An A+ for Vic Vinegar, certainly enough for Sneaky Pete. I think Sneaky Pete absolutely panicked early, gave away a ton of talent, and we asked Mr. Ahali about the trade, and he had this to say, quote, "Simply put, the trade was a mistake. I panicked after an abysmal week 1, and T. Higgins already proved he's worth more than Tua and Algier combined. However, Burrow is struggling, might miss some time. DJ Moore will get his, but Fields is a disaster. If the Falcons can keep running the ball and Tua stays healthy, it may wind up looking a more even deal by week 8. And lastly, after my comeback win during Monday Night Football, it's clear I have guys who can put up points and keep me clear of the Sacco. It'll be a fight for a playoff spot, but Sneaky Pete will remain sneaky." I can't help but think that this is a desperate owner trying to justify hitting the panic button despite staring into the abyss of what could be a very, very dark season for Sneaky Pete. Moving on to our second trade here, DeAndre Swift and Chris Godwin went to Roadrunners Naz, Debo Samuel, AJ Dillon to Strickland Propane. A straight position swap, so it's clear there's a couple different valuations amongst these owners with no other RBs in Philly. I think this one ends up being a mistake for Strickland Propane. AJ Dillon has yet to prove he can step up to the next level in Green Bay, and with Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, Debo has only really been average. Meanwhile, with only, one real running back in Philly, I'm going to say, DeAndre Swift, I think he could be an RB1 this year. He could definitely put up some points. He may save Roadrunners next season. We'll see. Now it's time to move on to our next segment with the man who could be the next Windy City Bull, Mr. Steve Blazer. So let's go ahead and hear from Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined again by the G League Trailblazer and the man presently looking down at everyone from the top of the standings, Mr. Steve Blazer. Steve obviously had quite an experience this past weekend at the G League tryout. How you feeling, Steve?
First of all, Jason, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm feeling good. The legs are a little bit sore. Um, and by that I mean my legs are cooked. Um, that's probably my biggest takeaway was that I'm like really, really out of basketball shape. Um, but I feel good otherwise,
Okay.
definitely.
Well, glad to hear it, and I can't wait to hear about how this tryout went. Obviously, we'll get to the day and kind of what they took you through, but I got to ask, leading into the tryout, how were your emotions? What were you feeling?
So it was kind of mixed emotions. I had times where I got this weird like false confidence when I was playing at Export Fitness, um, just by myself. Like I wasn't even playing with other people, but I was like making some shots, and I was like, like maybe. Um, and then that was kind of mixed with me just knowing that after playing for 30 minutes, like my legs were tired. I was like sucking wind, um, and I have not played basketball, and all I've done is just bad things to myself. Um, So I think I was able to like kind of separate the fact that I was going to be super tired and the fact that I'm not terrible at basketball, so I didn't think I was going to embarrass myself like too badly. And I also figured that since it's an open tryout, I didn't expect to be the worst player there or like in the worst shape or anything like that. So I didn't have too many like nerves going into it. I really wasn't too worried about like yeah, like getting embarrassed or like making any terrible mistakes because going into it, I was like, I'm not going to shoot a lot. Like, I'm going to pass. I'm going to try to dribble and play hard defense. So,
Okay. Well, I'm curious, like, what would you say the general skill level was, and how would you rate, where you were at skill wise relative to the other people that were there?
so I think what maybe the league overlooked was the fact that it was an open tryout and there were 150 people there. So
Oh, wow.
you didn't have to have any experience to actually go. So I would say there's a very, very wide range of skills. And so they had like, yeah, maybe 14 or 15 different courts and you were assigned to a court. And I think that was like basically based on whatever you put down as your prior playing experience. So the people on my court, like, were not insanely good. Like I would say if you went to like an export or a rec center or a park or whatever, like the better players there would be the same type of people that like I was playing with and against. So like because I was out of shape, I was on like the back half of that like not great group, but I wouldn't say I was like the worst player on my team or the worst player like on the court at any time.
Got it.
So
So,
yeah, it was mixed.
so to that extent, then, like, let's say that you're back in the old Notre Dame days and your peak fitness, like, do you think that having that just the lungs to actually like be up, to condition yourself for the trial, like, do you think that that would have helped you kind of get to like the next grouping or whatever?
So I don't think it would have helped me get to the next grouping, but I think I actually would have been like on the upper half of the people I played with. Because I
Okay.
think like we played 4 games. I think the first two were 20 minutes and the next two were 15 minutes. So like by game two, people were sucking wind. And like if I was just able to like run up and down the court consistently and like be able to like jump and like keep up and stuff like that and just give a consistent effort, I actually do think it would have made like a huge difference. I think if I had done this 5 years ago or 4 years ago when I was supposed to, I think like I would have done a lot better.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's super interesting. I think it was probably quite the day for you, but just do us a favor and kind of run us through the day start to finish. What you mentioned that you played some games, but what other kind of stuff did they put you through?
Yeah. So I woke up around 7 o'clock, so I wanted to get a good meal in, which I did. I ate a PB&J sandwich on the road over. Got a nice call from our commissioner. um, wishing me luck, but I would say more of an example of his just failure of leadership. Was really unsure of how I was going to prove that I was actually at the tryout. So he was, kind of begging me on his knees for me to send him some type of video or picture or things like that. So really just lack of foresight, I would say. Um, but so I got to the tryout around 8:45. Listened to some pump up music in my car until around 8:55 because check in started at 9 o'clock. As I walked up, there was a gentleman probably around 6 feet 7 inches tall with a Kansas State basketball bag in front of me, and I said, "Ooh, that's not good." Um, and the person checking him in recognized his name, and I was like, "Fuck." So then I walked up. They gave us just like a little like penny or something, which bullshit. We had to give it back after paying $300 fucking dollars.
Yeah,
Like, give me a $20 penny.
garbage.
Um, so you got assigned a court. I went down to my court, and then from like not yeah 9 to 10 o'clock, you could just kind of like shoot around, warm up. I kind of got to like see the caliber of player that like I was going to be with because it was pretty clear early on, like courts, one, two, three, four, whatever, were the actual good people. Most were like above 6'4", and then mine were like there was maybe like one or two people that were like 6'5" or over, but like everyone else was
Yeah.
maybe like 6'3", 6'4", and below. So we just kind of like shot around, dribble, warmed up, and then 10 o'clock we got a speech from I think the coach of the Windy City Bulls. Great gentleman, great organization that he's running. Kind of ran us through the day, and then until 11 o'clock we did kind of like a warm up. We just split in like big groups and did a warm up, active stretching and things like that, and then went into kind of like our own team. So you played in teams of 10 for your games, and you were assigned like two people that would coach. So we went through some offensive drills and some defensive drills, and then kind of got a general layout of like a pseudo like offensive like scheme kind of thing. Basically, just talking about like spacing. And then from 11 till like 12:45, it was just straight running fives, just games.
Well, I'm sure the legs are absolutely feeling it. I mean, obviously, it's a tough punishment. You got to go through it, and I think if I were doing it, I would feel probably pretty emasculated. But I got to ask you now. It seems like you seems like you got through it okay, and it didn't really rattle you.
Jason, I gotta be honest with you. I feel great. Um, Coming out of it, I felt uh so much joy and excitement. Like it was something that I would never do, and like coming out of it, I was like, well, if I trained, like I could come back next year and like I'd be actually a lot better. Like you never know. Like maybe like I would be on like court five instead of court six or something. Um, and so I actually really liked it. I don't think like looking back, I don't think it was a hard punishment. And looking back, I think there were a couple other people that it wouldn't have been a hard punishment for. Kind of with my hindsight glasses on, all I've been thinking about recently is who it actually would have been a good punishment for, which would be someone like a Nate Johnson, a Jason Stankiewicz, a Billy Rohalli, Short King, a Trevor Kinsey, but I would say, for someone like me who has a little bit of skill and a little bit of athleticism, uh, it was okay. I think the chorus would have been fine. I think Tim would have made 1,000 excuses and pretended he had a million different injuries. I think Sam would have been fine. I think Brian Durrani, low key, is an unreal basketball player, great defensive prowess. Um, but yeah, it was a really cool experience. I'm happy I did it. I'm still waiting for the league treasurer Tim Pollard to reimburse me for my entrance fee. Again, just kind of showing a lack of leadership and tone at the top from the crooked commissioner Mike, of course.
Well, Steve, I think everyone in the league is super happy that the punishment is done, that loop's closed. I'm glad it worked out for you, and it wasn't too bad. I think you're absolutely right that for some of us, it definitely could have been a much less fun experience. But obviously, given your athletic background, I think you might have been one of the best candidates for it. So glad to hear it went well. Any final thoughts on that before we just touch on your early season performance quickly?
Um, no, just thank you to the league for pushing me. there were some people, some rats kind of in the grass, kind of snaking around, talking behind my back, but I appreciate the people that actually came forward and really supported me. Sam Prentice talked about my jump shot a lot. Dan Zay said I looked like I had a good jump shot, which I really appreciated the day of. And although Coco was trying to cover his butt by making me prove that I went to the tryout, he did call me and wish me good luck. So thank you to all my supporters and my naysayers. It was for you guys.
Cool. All right, well, we got to touch on your early season performance here because you're obviously out to the gate with a very fast start. Two massive performances to open the year up. And honestly, the team's looking pretty solid. You got some solid running back depth. You're getting some decent wide receiver performances. QB might be a little bit of a dark zone at the moment, but there's obviously room to improve that. I mean, what's your take on the early part of the season so far?
I'm really excited with how my team's been performing. I don't want to talk too much about kind of what I think about my team overall, since it is so early, but I'm very excited for the season. I think my running backs are doing well. I'm glad I was able to pick up Kyron Williams because everyone else was sleeping, and I'm excited for Jonathan Taylor to come back.
Yeah, I mean, getting him back, I think personally, I think your team's going to be one of the prime trade candidates in the league because you will have so much running back depth that you'll certainly be in a position to potentially swing a 2-for-1 or something and improve the squad.
I do
Um,
actually have five running backs, and I did want to touch on that quickly because I have gotten some invitations to trade recently. As I said in my pre-draft interview, I don't really trade, and right now I think that my team needs all five of my starting running backs. Um, I think Raheem Mostert is very solid, and I need him. I think Jonathan Taylor is very solid when he comes back, and I'll need him. I think Kyron Williams is very solid. I think James Conner is very solid, and of course, my number one overall pick, Christian McCaffrey, very, very solid running back as well. And I think I need all five of them.
well, there you heard it. For the rest of the league, a bit of a hands-off warning. Take a Stand is currently closed for business potentially. It seems like it would take quite an offer for any moves to happen. But Steve, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for walking us through your tryout experience. Again, glad it went well for you. Best of luck in the future. Best of luck with the season. Hopefully, the trend continues and maybe you end up on top.
Thank you, Jason. Good luck to you as well.
All right. Okay, thank you again to Mr. Steve Blazer for joining us in that last segment. Obviously, it was great to hear about his G League tryout experience. Glad that he was able to get through it. And best of luck to him in the season as we move on here. But moving on to our final segment here. This is a new segment in the FTTC podcast. This is our mailbag, where you as a listener get the chance to write in a few questions for us to address and respond to on air. Now, just to start off on a pretty comical topic, Auto Draft Bot Squad showed up on the weekly shotgun this week with a tooth missing, and we did have a number of questions around that. Why was he missing a tooth? Did he perhaps turn his back on the commissioner and inspire a beating that knocked the tooth out? With one less front tooth, why didn't he chug faster? Some gap theory suggests it should have been 1.3 to 1.4 seconds faster. The official comment we got from the Auto Draft Bot Squad on this was, quote, I still get more bitches than the whole league combined, even with a missing tooth. So completely ignored what happened, refused to tell any kind of story, and honestly just taking the pride route. Personally, I think he may have been dabbling in some weekend activities in some dark places. There's rumor has it that the man likes to indulge in a dance or two of a sexual nature. Maybe took a kick to the face, knocked a tooth out. Who knows? That's the rumors that we're hearing. Whether or not that's true, I'll leave it up to the league to find out. Moving on to the next topic, we had a couple questions around the Vic Vinegar and Sneaky Pete trade. Eddie Farrell, 2016 champ, had a question that said, quote, do we need to put Trevor's name on a list somewhere? He's looking like a trade rapist after week 2. I'm inclined to agree. I think Vic Vinegar absolutely took Sneaky Pete into the back alley, had his way with him. And Vic Vinegar's going to be much better off for it. And if Sneaky Pete ends up in last place, he'll have nobody to blame but himself for making that move. However, Vic Vinegar also submitted a question. But, perhaps there's a little friendship on ice right now because he said, quote, did my trade with Billy cost us our friendship? I could see that happening. If Sneaky Pete finishes at the bottom of the table, I could definitely see that being the case. It would be a tough blow. They obviously have a great friendship, very close, but if you're going to take advantage of your friend like that, clearly you just don't care about him. Now, the next set of questions we had were again around our commissioner's behavior, and he seems to be a topic week in and week out. The first two we had were very targeted around Nick Chubb's horrific injury. And I'm just going to go ahead and read these questions because I think that the context that these listeners provided and the theories that they're tossing out there, frankly, need to be addressed. So, first and foremost, we had from Mr. C. Williams in Southern California, quote, longtime listener, big fan of the show. Thank you, Mr. C. Williams. I couldn't help but notice that Nick Chubb's horrific career-ending knee deletion arrived at a very convenient time for Commissioner Kokoris. Chubb's knee was removed from the plane of material existence when Crooked Karras was up by just 4 points on Roadrunners, Naz, with 2 quarters of football left to play. I also noticed that the injury coincided with the NFL filing a lawsuit against the Players Association, alleging the Players Association was advising its members to fake injuries in order to get a leg up in salary negotiations. This leads me to wonder, is it possible that Mr. Karras arranged a hit on Nick Chubb's knee, both in an attempt to salvage his already lost season and to send a mafioso-style shot across the bow warning to any other players who might be thinking about faking injuries going forward? If so, what can league members do to protect their players when he's inevitably falling short again in all of his future contests? So that's what Mr. C. Williams had to say. And similarly, we had another man here, I believe from Team DS's fandom, saying, quote, first-time caller, long-time listener of the pod, can you address the allegations that RFG Roger fucking Goodell put a hit out on Nick Chubb during Monday night's decisive matchup against Roadrunners Naz? Rumors of league corruption have been swirling since last year's championship matchup that resulted in the near fatality of Damar Hamlin and large wire transfers totaling over $500 being routed directly into Roadrunners Naz bank accounts, discrediting Naz and burying any future allegations by forcing the reigning champion to start 0-2 seems likely. Have you ever seen The Departed? Was the hit on Chubb similar to when Sullivan, played by Matt Damon, has Queenan, played by Martin Sheen, followed to his meeting with Costigan, played by Leo DiCaprio, resulting in Queenan being thrown from the roof to his death? I think in this scenario, RFG is Damon, Naz is Leo, and Chubb is poor Marty Sheen falling face first into concrete. But who in the league best represents Costello? What is our equivalent to a bunch of stolen triad microprocessors and which two managers are both fucking Vera Farmiga? So obviously here we have a couple commissioners that are very concerned about the Nick Chubb injury. First to address Mr. C. Williams in Southern California, I think no doubt the commissioner ordered a hit on Nick Chubb's knee. The commissioner was looking at an 0-2 start. I think there would clearly be some dark days for him. I'm not sure his pride could take that kind of hit. And clearly, Minkah Fitzpatrick was motivated. When you watch the hit, it's clearly dirty. Fitzpatrick comes flying in, takes out his knee. I think it's an absolute warning from the commissioner to the rest of the league saying, if I don't win this year, I'm going to fuck the rest of you. And that's pretty brutal from the commissioner. But moving on to the second question here, thinking about The Departed, it's a great question. I think in our league, Costello honestly may be Team DS. He's always sitting in the back. He runs a lot of business. He's always claiming there's nothing going on in the Treasury Department, that it's all above board. But who knows? He could be trading a bunch of crypto tokens in the background, moving that money, generating a ton of interest. And those could be the stolen triad microprocessors. This man could be investing this money and earning himself quite a return. Now, if we're talking about the two managers that are both fucking Vera Farmiga, though, I think you got to go with. We're going to go with Sneaky Pete and Big Vinegar. I think that they both are trying to get the same cookie, messing with the same players, but there's truly only one player coming out on top. And I think it's pretty clear who that is from the activity in this past week. Moving on to our last set of questions here, again revolving around Commissioner. Our G League hero from Take a Stand wanted to know, why does our quote KKK commissioner think it's okay to spill half his shotgun beer and not make up for it? I got to side with him on this one. You're going to spill half your beer. There's no additional beer punishment. You quote might be slurping it up off the floor. I just don't think he did that. We addressed some rumors of corruption last week. I think those still exist. There's not much you can do, though. How are you going to challenge a man in power? And finally, here from Vic Vinegar, will the commissioner acknowledge that I had a successful draft? We'll wait to hear from the commissioner on that. We'll reach out to him, see if we can get any kind of official comment from the Nice Catch Blanco Nino camp. But it's pretty clear that the commissioner was skeptical of the Vic Vinegar draft. I don't think he will ever acknowledge that it was a good draft. And honestly, we'll see if it plays out as a good draft. It may be. It seems like it could be a solid draft, but we'll see where it falls out in a couple weeks. But on that note, that'll end this episode of the FTTC podcast. Thank you again to all our listeners for tuning in, and we look forward to returning next week with a recap of week 3 and all the hottest takes from Indonesia. To all our fans out there, have a great day.